But again, thank you very much for having me here and talking to the Romanian market on a topic that is very close to our hearts at Swiss Re, which is basically bodily injury claims. I was actually asked to cover this topic, so I put it on the agenda, and then also talking with the organizer of the conference before I came here. We touched a little bit on telematics, as you already mentioned, and found it might be interesting to also discuss this a bit, because of course there's not a direct link between bodily injury and telematics, but we'll make it work. And so there's one slide actually where I want to speak about it, and then if you wish, we could of course discuss this in the course of the day. So basically, three topics: bodily injury claims in Europe as we see it and what we do about it. And you're going to see we have case studies, and we have a project going on within Swiss Re for 20 years already, which is called the BI Landscapes of Bodily Injury Landscape. Then second, moral damages, in quotation marks. There, I know you have experience in your market, and I can give you a little bit of the situation, the examples from Germany, as you know we treat this, what kind of role this plays in Germany, and I can tell you it's not as bad as it is here apparently. And how do we see that going forward? And then last but not least, the safety features we call it. So that's going to be telematics and maybe also a bit on driverless cars. Right, so bodily injury claims in Europe. First of all, a bit of the historical background. Why, or since when, have we been working on this topic? And that was, as I said, it's going back to the late 90s when we began to look at this issue. And already then we said, let's take a sample case, a hypothetical victim, and have this case handled by claims handlers and regulators in different countries and monitor this over time. So that's already back in the 90s, was the first approach of how we want to tackle the issue. So again, it started very late, very early on in the 90s, and it says Swiss Re here, but at the time actually it was Bavarian Re, where I worked at the time. And then in 2004, the Swiss Re Drive network, which was a network of motor specialists across the Swiss Re group, and that was actually led by me. We picked this up and worked really hard on the topic, and then in 2005 and 2007, we issued a study, which you can still download from the Swiss Re website. It's called European Motor Markets, and it has both portfolio information on the different markets and claims information. So this hypothetical victim is already part of the European motor markets. Then this model case was later on expanded to two more types of injuries, which are more common in the portfolio. And then the whole project was refined over the years. As you see, 2010, then we developed a tool, an Excel-based tool, to capture the data. Yes, and why do we do that? What is the goal? Why it's your, you have these cases on your desks every day, but must be mindful of that at the end of the day, these cases end up at our desk, right? At the end of the day, it's usually the reinsurance industry that pays for these claims. And of course, this gets reflected into the premium somehow, but we have, so the Swiss Re and the reinsurance industry, of course, has a vested interest in getting a better understanding of these claims, to see the tendencies, and then allow some kind of a predictability. That was already in the agenda. We need to be able to predict the cases, predict the amount of money that we spend. Because if we were not able to predict, in a framework, of course, not precisely, but we need to have a feeling of where claims develop, and often you see tendencies and trends in your data. You need to capture this, and reflected in your rate making. Also, there's legal changes, the legal environment constantly change, and we all know this is very hard to predict, to anticipate, and also inflation and other economic factors superimpose inflation, which affects and has an impact on the claims amounts. But there we do have a model that we put into our claims data system, and that helps us, of course, to do the premium calculation. As I said, there are different components that what we cover in the tool and that we assess and use it for rate making. So the whole goal, I can say, really is to increase our knowledge. We need to understand, we need to have a deep understanding of what's going on in these severe bodily injury claims, and so we can do a more accurate pricing, costing, and also a reserving. And maybe also here I can echo what we've been talking about this morning on databases. I mean, this it goes without saying. For me, this is a no-brainer. Of course, we need data. We need good databases, and of course, this is a database, kind of. But also, what we do have in many Western European countries, like I can speak for Germany, where there's a very close cooperation between the insurance industry and also the police, but less the police, but more the registration offices. When you register a car, of course, you need to have an insurance, and there's a system that, of course, checks whether you have insurance or not. So this is a key element, I could say, of the insurance industry. And again, to me, that it goes without saying that that we should, or that every country should work on establishing such databases and cooperations. Right. So here's the Swiss Re approach. A hypothetical victim that we described. It's a 30-year-old man with an average income. He's employed dependently. He is married with 2 children, aged 2 and 5. His wife is without an income. And then there's 3 predefined injury scenarios that we look at. And as I said, the other 2 down the line, they've come into play later on. So tetraplegic, so the worst case, you could say, with the highest level of assistance. That is the core case that we look at, and I'll show you some statistics later on how do we see these claims across Europe. And then also we have information on paraplegic cases, and then in case of the victim dies. So this is the sort of the core of the whole project. This hypothetical victim, we identified this with different sub-scenarios, and then what we did, we asked claims regulators across, Europe and Asia actually, to settle that claim, and then see what are the components of the claim and what's the outcome. Yeah, of course, there's some normalizing assumptions. Of course, we say the case should be settled within the accident year, so immediately, because otherwise, you get lost in too many details. We want to have, situations where the cases are comparable over time. So it is, from an economic perspective, the cases must be comparable, of course, but then we all know it's not the ultimate value. Of course, cases could be reopened and then reassessed and get worse. So this is not covered here. So these normalizing assumptions make all the cases comparable and uniform across countries. Yes, and the scope, the geographical scope, as I said, it's mainly European, and we started with European countries first, but now also we have 6 Asian countries for which we can provide figures. And then, as I said, there's 3 sub-scenarios, kind of. A baseline scenario, a reference scenario, and even a probabilistic scenario, which is the newest kits, so to say. So in the baseline, we just say, okay, all the claim components that we see and get from the claims regulators are driven only by a future wage index, which we get estimates on. And the more important, again, the core scenario would be the second one, called the reference line scenario, where we take into account future wage increases, plus a superimposed inflation that we monitor in this specific country over the last 5 to 10 years, depending on how the regulators in the specific countries would see it. And then third, and I'm not going into detail on this one here, where we look at the single components and where we come up with a probabilistic model. You know, what is the probability of, you know, this component going here or there? But again, this is not the topic of the talk today, and it's pretty new. And so these are the results, the current results. As I said, we already started this 20 years ago, and of course the numbers have changed over time, and they've changed dramatically, I can tell you. But so this will be a snapshot actually of this year. April 2015 is what we see in our data for this tetraplegic case and the claim scenario 2, so the reference line scenario. That is the core, the central scenario that we look at. It's total claims costs, and then you see on the left side the countries, the European countries that we cover here, so not the Asian ones, and then the different loss components. I hope you can read it. There's loss of earnings, assistance, medical care, pain and suffering, we're going to get to that, and then a remainder 4. So basically 3 categories, you can say. And yeah, and as you see, the range is huge, right? It's the UK, and we all know that, the highest awards. So that case, on average, in the UK, would be worth 14 million euros today. And then the lowest figure is Denmark, actually. But also if you look at Poland, you know, there's cases round about 1 million. So the range is from 1 million to 14. So a factor of 14, 15, roughly, you can say you can find for a very specified case within Europe alone. Right. Then when you look at the different components of the claims, of course, the second component, assistance and medical treatment, that is the major driver of the claims. So roughly speaking, you can say up to 50% of the claim, that's the case in the UK actually, is consumed by the medics. And pain and suffering, and as we go on in our talk, we want to talk about pain and suffering a bit. You can see that it does play a role. So that's the dark red bar. You can see, for instance, in the UK, we see it's not really driving the cases. In Italy, actually, it's pretty big. But then in all the other countries here, as we speak today, it is not really the key component of the claim. Right, so pain and suffering, I see. Yeah, then let's move to Germany, actually. I think, okay, well, I might say this, you know, the study is, of course, provided to our clients. And what we do now, we used to have this, the European Motor Market Study, which is a book, actually. What we do now is we give out leaflets or folders that describe each and every country individually. So unfortunately, Romania is not on here, but for each of the countries, not all of them are finished now, but for each of these countries, we have little leaflets, folders that you can get from your client manager to your client of Swiss Re, and get this information. Right, then let's go on to what we call our moral damages. And I'll talk about Germany, then going on. And the heads of damage that we see in Germany, or that victims get compensated for in Germany, are twofold. So, of course, first of all, there's material damages, which things paid everywhere. And there's non-material damage, moral damages, which is pain and suffering, and then another component, again, because pain and suffering, I'm not sure really about the terminology. There's, you find different ways to put it in the literature. But it's sort of non-material compensation for close relatives. So these, under moral damages, under non-material damages, we want to understand these two topics. And everything else, you can see, is very much measurable, right? If you look at loss of earnings, care costs, funeral costs, all of that, at the end of the day, you get a bill, right? You get a concrete number, and you compensate for this. So this is, with whatever metric you want to apply, we can measure these costs. But then moral damages, there we are in an area where we know this is hard, or maybe not at all, to be measured. But still, we pay for pain and suffering and moral damages in Germany. And as I said, there's no strict rules around it, and I think that that is okay, because, again, the claims are hard to measure. But there are principles that we apply, principles that get applied in courts. And it's a pretty old component, actually, of claims. It's already, when you look into literature, in the 17th century, people were aware that this claim should be available, really, to a plaintiff. And, of course, it's here to compensate for non-material damage or pain, and that pain must be substantial, right? There's a threshold. I think that's also clear. It must be above a certain level. And we all acknowledge the compensation is hard to set. Two cases can hardly be compared. We got to be aware of that. And if possible at all, the courts say, please try to settle this topic, this aspect of the claim out of court. The courts themselves, they feel not very comfortable really to dealing with these cases. Of course, often they have to, and if they have to, there are numerous documented cases. This morning we heard case law can be applied, and in Germany we have codified law, so case law, as in the UK, is not a basis that the courts decide upon, but here there are documented cases, tables from the automobile clubs and from other involved parties where you can find cases and try to compare. But again, we are aware none two cases are really comparable, but there's a guideline. Then also we think, or in Germany, this payment for pain and suffering shall not be influenced by any other component. So you cannot say, well, you have loss of earnings in the millions, so why do you still come back and ask for pain and suffering? Pain and suffering is isolated in itself. It's not, there's no deduction on pain and suffering for any other compensation you get as a principle. And also pretty new, there was a discussion that the claim is inheritable. If your father dies, for instance, and he would have had that claim, it can be passed on to sons or whoever inherits from him. And the highest award so far in Germany is 700,000 euros. And also I will have some other figures for you as well. But let me move on to, again, going back, this is, general principles on pain and suffering, right? Now we move on to the more specific case, pain and suffering, and then awards to close relatives in Germany. And as I said before, this claim is not, from a legal perspective, it's not available for a plaintiff, but we are in a process of changing that. There's numerous discussions on all levels that we really will need to change that. And just recently, or 2012 it was, the Supreme Court has decided that that pain and suffering can be awarded to close relatives under these circumstances, well described here, if that relative had witnessed the accident. So if you were around and you saw somebody die, or you yourself have shock, right? I know that many people here understand German. Schockschaden, they call it. So a psychopathologically relevant shock as you were informed about the events. So under these circumstances, and it's pretty strict, I would say, the BGH, the Supreme Court, says under these circumstances, yes, then it is possible to have this claim available. But again, generally speaking, no, there's no legal foundation for it. And then usual mourning, I think that is clear, is not sufficient for making such a claim. And again, there's a general agreement that these cases cannot be measured as other components of the claim. This should be an out-of-court settlement. Yes, and here are some of the cases that go back to the 90s again. So you see, we've had this topic probably forever, I would say. And of course, these are not the only claims. Again, there's tables, and all these tables, all these events, they get documented, and of course, the court or whoever settles these claims should use these tables somehow. And here you get a feeling of, what are, and this is representative collection of a couple of cases. You see how much money is awarded in these cases. So the highest amount you see up there, the death of 3 only children to a married couple in a motor accident, and there was pain and suffering awarded to the father and the mother. And it's still Deutschmarks, you see, and then it changed to euro in 2002. So you can see that the figures are not that high. I think we as an insurance industry we can very well live with that. But we all know, as I said, there's discussions on all levels, and this is going to get up, maybe worse. Let's see, because now there is a tendency, really, and there's a draft proposal also, so it gets into the court to change that and to make this more reliable. So it's not saying you might, but you better shouldn't. So the legislature really is working on this, and what we have so far is this draft proposal. You can read it for yourself, which would bring a little more clarity to the court also to settle these cases. And then as close relatives, for instance, that's one, what is a close relative, right? But here in this draft proposal, we identify who qualifies for this status. And then as always, and I think that came up in the discussions also this morning, the legislature, usually they're not very knowledgeable about insurance, right? They believe, well, there's no implications, right? I mean, we clarify this, and then actually you can sort it out. Of course, we, the insurance industry, we know this will have an impact, so we challenge the view of the legislature that it won't have an impact. Again, I think we can sort it out, we can work with it, but we need to be aware that this will lead to some changes to our business. So the outlook, for me, I mean, it's pretty clear. The supporters, of course, they point to other European countries where this claim component, and you see the countries listed here, and you saw in my chart already, say how this is a reality in most European countries. So also, we need to have that in Germany as well. And then on an EU level, EU working group that has begin to tackle the issue, and they also support the introduction of this new head of damage. And then also in Germany, there is a broad support for this new component. But the insurance industry, as I said, they are hesitant, and the insurance does not share this view of the Deutscher Verkehrsgerichtstag, which is a very high body in Germany, on this initiative. But as always, there's a trend to align this across Europe. So my personal belief, first of all, is it'll not go away. We will have to face it. It'll come, and I think we can deal with it. But it's got to be predictable, and that again, it was on the agenda. And again, this for me goes without saying. Insurance industry, it's not rocket science, but we need to have clear guidelines on what we pay for and what we don't, because otherwise, accurate rate making would not be possible. And if you wanted, and I think it's a core principle really of the insurance, that if you want to cover really completely unpredictable risks, then you need to have endless resources, as the state usually has, but as we all know, not even them have it. So what we need is again a framework. I would not support to have very strict rules and saying, these are the cases that we've seen so far, and like in Gliedertaxes, you might know this, whereas clearly defined, the loss of a finger, for instance, is whatever points, and it's completely disregarding your profession, right? I mean, if a surgeon loses his finger and he can't perform his job anymore, it's different than from a construction worker. So what we need is a principles-based framework for this cost component guidelines, maybe I could say, that just prevent us from having surprises. And there are other frameworks, like in Spain, the Baremo, which has just been introduced, or they're about to introduce. I think it's not in force yet. And there are other frameworks that we deal with on a daily basis, really. And I think these can be an example for a framework in this respect. And yes, and there's a parallel, actually, and that then takes me to my final slide, really the safety features or technology in insurance. Now, it's a bit far-fetched, I know, this switch now from bodily injury and pain and suffering to this. But all I'm saying is, in the insurance industry, we need to have these frameworks. We always have them, right? And if that stops, if some of the rules cease to exist, then we have a problem. And look at these two motorcyclists, right? The one up there wearing a helmet and a leather suit, and the other one no helmet with his bride in the back seat. Now, who of these would you think drives more cautiously, right? It's probably the one that does not comply with the rules, right? Because he doesn't have a helmet. And the other one up there is a racer, and he's probably a bad risk from an insurance perspective. But still, we'd be used to saying, okay, if you wear a helmet, you're at a good risk, and the other one is a bad risk. That sometimes can be very deceiving. And we've seen this. That leads me to safety features that we nowadays implement in the cars, and we all say they are the driver of the declining frequencies. We saw charts this morning from the UK, I think it was, where frequencies are declining, and that's a fact all across Europe. And especially the automobile industry claims, well, this is because of the safety features, and probably that is a component, but it doesn't go without saying, actually. Safety features, and we've seen this with ABS, that's anti-lock braking systems. That was introduced in the late 90s from the automobile industry. And many insurance companies, they gave a discount if you had ABS. Now, a year later, 2 years later, they found out they should have charged on loading, actually, because the risk behavior of the people with ABS was changed. Because thinking, well, I got ABS, I can drive faster now, leads actually to higher frequency for these cars. And that discount was soon done away. So again, safety features, generally speaking, yes, they do help to bring the frequency down, but it's not a given. We need to look at every individual case and then also see what are the other factors doing, right? How do other factors come into play that influence our driving behavior? And that's especially true with the the increasing use of what we call advanced driver assistance systems, ADS. Nowadays cars are equipped with lane control, adaptive cruise control, cameras, radars all over. Some of these aspects really can bring the claims frequency down. I believe that very much, but others maybe not. So I think we need to see that in every individual case. And then maybe a word on the telematics, as it was mentioned in the introduction. Telematic devices, we all know they've been around for 20 years, but you must say the penetration in the market is still very, very low. For Germany and the UK, the penetration is around about 3%, not more, in retail cases. Of course, in commercial vehicles, there's a higher usage of telematics, but not so much to use it for insurance reasons and to use it for the rate making, but rather for risk management and fleet optimization. So there's also different motivation of why we use telematics. And I like to say Italy actually is the leading market in Europe that has, the most cars there are equipped with telematics. But the motivation originally actually was fraud detection and to recover cars after they've been stolen. Whereas in the UK, where you had certain tariffs for young people, actually young drivers, to rate on their driving behavior, documented and reported by telematic devices. And of course, this influences the driving behavior. Just yesterday, we had a discussion with somebody from the industry. I think the mere presence of such a box, the telematic box, already can influence your driving behavior. I truly believe you don't necessarily report all the data. I think if you had like a placebo box in the car, that already might do the case. So all of that, the technology, usage of technology, that will have an impact on the loss frequency. I think we can be sure about that, but not each and every one device. I think we need really, and in Germany that's being done at a very individual, at every feature itself, what kind of an impact would it have? And some, as I said, ABS, did not have the impact it was supposed to have. But that's only, one side of the story. We all say, well, frequency is going down. Is that going to bring down the premiums, the claims? The other component is severity. And we all see that severity, usually it goes up because it is driven by inflation and then bodily injury and superimposed inflation. So severity, that remains to be seen, and that's why I put a question mark, because I want to leave you with this question mark actually, to see, or to think about yourself, where's the severity of claims, or the average amount of claims? Where is that going, and does technology really have an impact on the severity of claims? And both frequency and severity, that is, at the end of the day, what we need to do, or what we need to be aware of, and we need to factor into our rate making to come up with a premium that, allows us all to have a sustainable business.